Right, then we'll start. Good evening to all the participants. I'm Idris Ahmed Sharif. I am the National Advisor for the National Association of Students of Architecture. Welcome you to the session on demystifying the OAN grants program. The Observation and Action Network Grants Program is a collaboration with the Center for the Living City, the Urban Design Collective, and NASA India that invites students who are extremely passionate about transforming their cities and towns for a better tomorrow. Right. So this session is on demystifying the OAN grants program. We will be discussing development of projects and navigation through any uncertainties that the participants have. So it'll be more of an interactive session where our panelists will be answering questions that the audience will be putting forward. So you guys can put forward your queries on the Zoom's chat or YouTube live comment section. So we'll be getting your questions through there and we'll be answering them. So we have two panelists today. First panelist is architect Stephen Goldsmith. Hi, Stephen. Stephen was an associate professor in the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning at the University of Utah. He was also the core director for the university at the consortium Dark Sky Studies. He was also the former planning director for the Salt Lake City, making him the first artist planning director in a major city in the United States. Right. He worked on many projects, including an award-winning guide titled Towards a Walkable Downtown. Currently, Stephen is the director of the Center of the Living City, for the Living City. Right. And our second panelist is from the Urban Design Collective. We have architect Vidya Mohan Kumar. Hello. Hi, Vidya. Vidya has a work experience in the field of urban design for over 15 years. Her work is focused on creating urban spaces that are people-oriented and centered around transit as part of a sustainable development. She has been involved in several strategic planning projects, local area plans, campus master plans for existing developments in many cities around the world. She is the founder of the Urban Design Collective, which is a platform for urban designers to create livable and sustainable cities through community engagement. Right. So these are our panelists, and we'll go ahead with, we'll probably start with why there's such a need for a program. Probably Stephen can continue. Before Stephen starts, sorry, Stephen, we'll go ahead with the general guidelines for this session. So basically, you guys can ask your questions again through Zoom's chat room or through YouTube Live's comment section. No technical questions will be answered. Questions that are genuine and aren't answered due to insufficient time will be answered through text and put on nasaindia.co/OAN in a document. So you guys can get it there. And if on Zoom, if anybody has the same question as someone else has put it up, you guys can upvote the question so that it comes on the top so that we can see it more easier for us. Right. So probably Stephen can now tell us why there's a need for such a program.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you to NASA and to the Urban Design Collective, Vidya in particular, for making this opportunity available to all of you and to all of us. The Observation and Action Network has begun with this grants program. We are hoping that this first attempt to invite the creative responses of students in India will stimulate students all over the world to join us, because the world needs the creativity of young architects, young designers, young landscape architects. It needs that kind of creativity in order for us to manage some of the deep crises in urban areas that we see today. Some of the reasons to be involved in this program include responding to the kinds of urgent problems that you see in the places that you care about. Our organization was started with the support of Jane Jacobs. And one of the things that she noted was that people will only take care of the places that they love. It's our expectation and it's our hope that the places that you're choosing to respond to, whether it's a social problem that you see, whether it's an architectural problem you see, whether it's a mobility problem you see, the host of human experiences that exist in the neighborhoods that you love are ripe for the kind of creative responses that you might see. The urgency is what gives birth to all of this. I don't think that there's a question for any of us that urban areas have been degraded, Some of them have opportunities and some of them have problems. In order for us to reclaim the spaces that matter in our lives, it's important that people like you, students like you, find ways to help us address these, not waiting for others to do this work, but for you to join us in doing this work. Especially now in a situation where we're unable to move as freely in our streets, in our cities because of COVID-19, especially now is a time for us to be deeply creative in choosing our sites, deeply creative in finding the kind of responses that we need. But it is your evolutionary impulse, you as the young leaders, emerging leaders in the world today. It's because of you that we've created this program, and it's because of you that the kind of solutions that we're hoping to find will actually come about.
Right. Thank you on the insight, Stephen. Vidya, would you like to add anything on that?
Thanks, Stephen. We've, as Urban Design Collective, we've been working with NASA for like a little over 3 years now. And we are also extremely excited to take this step forward to bring this program to you and to work with you on this very exciting program, which allows the OAN Fellows to be part of an emerging global network of change makers. And I think that is what, is most exciting, that it's not just us sitting here, but it's actually about creating this entire network and sharing ideas and exchanging, because we're such a connected world. And it's important to understand and appreciate that solutions can be shared, ideas can be shared, and all of that thought exchange can lend itself to a much more wider impact for all of us. On that aspect, it's a very exciting program. For us at Urban Design Collective, also it's a very exciting program because it allows us to work with a young demographic. We are a collaborative platform who want to make livable cities through participatory planning, and this program for us is very special because it allows us to do this in a way that it involves architecture students from across the country to do this, to come along with us on this journey. So in that sense, so many reasons to be excited. We do understand that there's been a bit of a disappointment and like shifting of plans because of the pandemic situation that we are in, but nevertheless, I think the whole idea is that we're resilient, and we can overcome this, and we can overcome this together. And that was the reason why we also put out the survey. That was because we felt the need to have a two-way communication with the students, because the brief was out, we're waiting for responses and submissions to come in, but at the same time, internally, we were constantly thinking about what is happening on the ground, and how the students are responding and reacting to this. We are based in Chennai. We're very well aware of what kind of a grinding halt this situation can bring all of us to. So we reached out, and I want to sincerely thank every one of you who filled out this survey form. It has been immensely useful for us to understand the difficulties and challenges that all of you may be facing, the anxieties, the doubts, and all of the conundrums that you may be going through with regard to this program and how to participate. And that's why we're here. We're here to sort of address some of these issues that have come up, and and also help you navigate through it. And together we can make this work.
Right. Another thing for all of our participants, all of you are anonymous to each other and us, so be free in putting out queries and questions, whatever you would like our panelists to answer. So like Vidya said, thanks to all the people who answered the survey, because through that we've got a lot of things that we can clarify on our part that we might have not thought till now. Right. So to begin with, due to the COVID scenario in the country, a lot of them are having doubts regarding the video documentation. So what would you say for that, Stephen and Vidya? So they're saying that there's a lot of issue that they cannot go out and shoot a video because probably that place is locked down or red zone. So what would you guys suggest for that?
So
This
Vidya, do
is
you
a
want?
general, like in general access to the site is an issue, right? Like, I mean, that was what
Yes.
we came across in the surveys, that not just from a point of view of submitting the video that is a requirement for the program, but also that they're not able to even access the site to make an assessment and therefore respond to it.
Right.
Stephen, you wanna go first, and then I kind of take the local context.
Sure. We understand the challenges of trying to gain access to the sites for video. We also understand that it's the choice of the site that you are making can reflect your ability to access it. In other words, there may be a site that's far away from where you are that you would like to work on, but because it's inaccessible, you need to find a site that's closer to where you are. And you can access that site with video in a number of different ways. And if it's not video, you may not have access to a drone, but a drone might be able to capture some of those images. You may be able to help identify the site through Google Earth. You may have friends, family, colleagues who are in the area who could actually take photos from their windows or take photos from their street, and you could begin collecting them that way. One of the challenges that could be interpreted as exciting is how do we adapt to the design challenges, the site challenges that we have to face because of COVID, and how do we work around it? One other way that you may want to consider if you're finding that the access is really blunted would be to do drawings from memory. You could do drawings of those spaces because, again, as Jane Jacobs said, we care about the places we'll only work on and change the places that we love. You should know the site, hopefully well enough that from your own memory, your own experience, you should be able to even sketch that out if you don't have access to video. So those are some of the ideas that we've been discussing under the circumstances, but there are probably even more ways that you could access the site.
Right. So yeah, go ahead. Vidya.
Some of the options, of course, are, as Stephen pointed out, like there's satellite imagery. You can make do with Google Earth fly-throughs, or sometimes you may even find archival images of the particular neighborhood or site that you're looking for, and there may be newspaper articles. I just want to sort of like point out that your video. I mean, of course, accessing the site, and as I will definitely reiterate what Stephen said, that it would be advisable that you choose a site that you're familiar with and that you care about deeply. Because so even if you're not able to see it in person right now, there is a strong connection that comes from memory, or maybe even collective memory of the people that you may know. So it's worth talking to people and asking for sort of oral history accounts. All of that is fine. But I want to also point out that as regards the video, I know this has been a concern, but it's a pitch video and it's a very short video, and it could technically even be your own self making a case for the project, because that's what it is about. The pitch video doesn't need to necessarily have like video footage of the site that you're talking about. It needs to actually capture the essence of the challenge that you want to deal with and the way you want to deal with it, the approach and the methodology. And I mean, as I said, technically it could be an entire video with just the team speaking, set up the camera and just all of you speak and share what you feel about the site, what you feel is a problem there, and how you want to go about and address it. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the strength of the ideas. We're looking for the gravity of the issue, and not really the sort of expert sort of the film editing quality, that's not necessarily what we're looking for, and definitely not in a situation like this. We're very well aware of the limitations with accessing site. I think it's, I want you all to just keep in mind that we're also very realistic about the situation, and therefore the expectations will be on something else, which is the ideas and the content of the proposal, and not the way it is put together.
So design excellence and craftsmanship are always important in anything that we do, but we're not expecting you to be filmmakers. We're not expecting this to receive an Academy Award. This is for positioning the jury so that the jury will be able to recognize the area and understand the kind of intervention that you are creating.
I'd also add to it and say that, it's a creative response, the video is also a creative response, like how you want to present it is also a sign of how you are adapting to the situation. And, this situation's not going away anytime soon. So we would like your approach to the problem and the, and it itself to sort of come across in the way you're putting together this video. It's possible, I think, and we know it's possible from you.
Right. I think because in the brief it says video documentation, they kind of thought that they should go physically and examine the site. But with your answers, it's clear that they can document the site with just what they know about the site and why they're choosing the site for this program. Right. I think that makes it clear. Right. So another question was alternative ways to identify and document the problem. I think you both have answered that. So we'll move on to the next question. How to identify the concerned authority and approach for permissions. I think Vidya might be better to answer this one because she's from Chennai.
I'm from Chennai, so I can answer this again. I understand that permissions may be tough. And permissions are not critical right now. We're not expecting that you get permissions and show us that you've got permissions for intervention on the ground when you are making the submission on the 18th of July. That's just not going to happen. The permissions are actually part of the methodology and approach. Like, as you're working on the project, you've got to show progress and you've got to approach the authorities. What we do expect now from a permissions perspective is that you know who you need to ask permissions from. That's all. Right? For the submission stage, I think it's important that you are aware of who your stakeholders are, and that includes stakeholders who are in a position to give statutory approvals for a project that you may be taking up. So how we get the permissions and going for the permissions is very much a later stage. But as I said, just be aware at this point that I'm going to need permission from the municipal authority, and I'm going to need permission from my RWA, the Resident Welfare Association, or I'm going to need permission from my local ward counselor. I think it's important that you identify who are these people that we're going to have to reach out to, because that's, as I said, it's at a later stage. Like, once you've developed the project and then you take it forward and then present it to them. So does that answer your question?
Right. I think so. Other people can put up any questions if this is not clear.
Yeah. I'll just add one more thing, that it would be wise to take up something at a smaller scale, like at a neighborhood scale. It's the most basic unit for intervention if you're looking to impact change, and at the neighborhood level, if you're able to sort of identify who your stakeholders are, and if you're kind of confident that you will have access to them, like a few, like 1 or 2 months down the line, also would be good for you to keep that in mind and use that as a measure to choose a particular site. Like, don't choose something that's going to require, like, a very elaborate approval process, or if it needs some sort of political intervention, or like, the commissioner to say yes or something of the sort. I think that's like unnecessarily complicating things for you. And also, it like I urge you all to think of the scale of intervention. We would like it to be scalable, but the first demonstration needs to happen first. Um, and of course, all of this will work itself out as we work with the winning candidates to develop the program, and the mentorship angle of OAN will definitely cover all of this. But just in terms of putting together a proposal itself, it would be wise for you, because you'll have to think through several stages even as you're putting together the proposal. So might as well keep this, in a way that is handleable even for you.
Right.
I would add one more consideration that you may want to think about, and that is that you can celebrate the temporary in the solution that you come up with. There may be pilot projects, ideas that you may not need to have a permanent permission, but there might be someone who says, yes, you can try that for a year, or you can try that for 6 months, and we'll see how it performs. And if it performs, then we can make it permanent. So think about the moment, think about the temporary, and celebrate that if you think that it might be too difficult to get permanent permissions.
Right. All right. I think that answers it beautifully. So we have actually a question up here on Zoom also, and a comment also. It's basically regarding the community interaction, and it's in normal conditions itself, it is a challenge. But now people are asking that due to whatever the situation is, so how do we go about it? And we also had a similar question from the surveys that stakeholder engagement, how do we go about it? So probably we'll split this up into two questions. Who is a stakeholder? And then we'll get into, how stakeholder engagement can be pursued. To start with, we'll probably who is a stakeholder, so that our participants get to know exactly who they have to cater to.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen because I have a little slide deck that covers this particular aspect. It was a very prominent finding from our survey itself. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
So there are two parts, of course, as you rightly said, Idris. One is the mapping and the engagement on a normal basis, and also how do we go about it in a situation like now, right? So stakeholder mapping, I want to sort of like break it down into three very critical aspects, which is one is keeping the communities informed, two is hearing out communities, and the third is collaborative design. Now think of this as, the first one, which is keeping communities informed, is a one-way communication. And the second part is a two-way communication, which is hearing out communities. And the third part is collaborative design, where you're working with them together, right? And this is like the sort of, if I can say, it's the essence of community engagement and stakeholder engagement. But the first thing, as you pointed out, is how do you identify the stakeholders, right? Who do you know? Who is the community here? Like, keeping the community informed. Who is the community that I need to keep informed is a question that needs to be answered, right? Now, in any project, this is like a sample set of stakeholder profiles that you will encounter. Like there will be a government sector, which is one stakeholder profile, and all the agencies that fall within the government sector. This could include the municipality, the traffic police, the parks department, the water supply, drainage, so on and so forth. These are your government sector stakeholders. Then you have the statutory agencies, and this is the people that give you approval for a project, right? So development authority is a statutory agency. The third is the political sector. So this is your elected representatives, right? That's another stakeholder profile. The fourth is the commercial sector, which is businesses, economies. It could include even the vendors that are, your or informal vendors that are on the streets. All of these form the commercial sector. And then you have the NGOs, the non-governmental sector, and subject matter experts. So people who are very well versed, practitioners, very well versed in a particular topic. These are also stakeholder profiles. Civil society entities and the resident population itself, which needs to be considered in varying demographic profiles. That includes children, senior citizens, um, transgender communities, whatever, the entire gamut and range of demographic profiles. So these are sample set of profiles. So to get you started on how you want to map stakeholders for this chosen site, it would be useful to go through this list and see if you can start putting down. It could be names, it could be organizations, it could be departments, it could be entities. But it's useful to sort of create this list of who are your potential stakeholders. Right now, once you've done this, the next thing is to sort of put them on a grid of that talks about their level of influence and their level of interest. So the level of influence is how much can they sway this project, like how much can they influence or drive this project or shape it or change it, right? And then there's another category, which is their level of interest. How much, some people may be very, very interested in the project, but they may have a very low level of influence because they don't have that much of a voice, right? But they may be extremely passionate. It may be something that's directly concerning them. And they have a very low level of influence in terms of how they can drive it or shape it, right? So once you have your list of different stakeholder profiles, it's useful to sort of plot all of them on a grid like this. I'm going to show you an example, right? So this is like, suppose, where we have all of these stakeholders, right? You have the political sector, who may typically have high level of influence because they can shape and drive the project. They may also have a high level of interest if it gives them visibility, right? If it doesn't, they probably go to the other end of the spectrum. Likewise, an NGO might have a high level of interest, but not sure what kind of level of influence they might have, right? Again, a subject matter expert might have a high level of interest. Again, not sure how much they can sway. This is just an example. It's possible that these dots could be in different places on this grid, and that's what you need to be doing as well, right? So you have different, and there's also the resident population who may have a low level of influence and also maybe a low level of interest, which is probably due to a lack of awareness, right? And therefore, it means that you need to figure out how you want to make them aware of it, how you want to get them interested. Do you want to increase their level of interest? And that's all part of what you want to do with the stakeholder engagement strategy, right? Now, when you start working on a project, it's useful to identify these players and place them on this grid also for another reason, which is that some of these people could potentially help you in shaping and developing your project, which is, for instance, the subject matter experts and the NGOs who might already have a lot of information on the project or the issue that you're trying to deal with. And they might be able to help you in terms of shaping and developing the project. So especially in a situation like this, it's useful to quickly identify these people and target them and see if you can reach out to them and get their inputs on your project itself, right? So this is sort of, typical way that you would go about identifying stakeholders and mapping them and seeing how you want to keep them involved, their level of engagement, and how you want to reach out to them. And it's just a way to break it down so that you know how to go about this aspect, right? And then once you have done all of that, like you've identified stakeholders, you figured out their levels of influence, you can use various techniques. That could be like focus group discussions where you spend you assemble small groups of people and have a discussion on very, very sort of critical aspects of the project that you're trying to deal with. Or you can do a design workshop with the stakeholders, or you can have a community meeting where you can present your ideas and ask them if they like it, which becomes like a referendum. or you can, sort of like have a presentation of what it is that you're trying to do, so on and so forth. But as you can see from these photographs, right, we're not going to be able to do this now because there's a lot of people in these photographs, and it's not possible to assemble a lot of people now, right? This kind of mode of engagement is going to be very difficult. This would be the best way to do it, but it's going to be very difficult to do it right now, right? So that kind of goes into the second part of the question that Idris brought up, is how do we do this in an era of physical distancing? Um, so this is what we do as an organization as well. So we actually, the beginning of June, brought out a publication which is titled exactly this: Participatory Planning in the Era of Physical Distancing, where we actually listed out a whole, following the same three aspects of stakeholder engagement. We brought out, we sort of put out a whole load of ideas on how you can go about it, right? For instance, as you can see here, this is an example of a focus group discussion, which follows social distancing norms. Like, you're not assembling too many people, but you're also maintaining social distancing. This person over here is standing with the microphone, and so you're not in very close contact with with the people that you're interacting with. Then there's poster walls, notice boards, where you're trying to inform people. You can design art installations to seek views and opinions, because if you want to identify what are their needs and requirements, and you can go ahead and put out an installation and seek opinions through that, all of which don't require anyone to be there personally. It's self-explanatory. People can just come and drop in their ideas and go. This was another example where we called it the balcony window engagement, where there's a person who's standing here and holding out different options of design, and people who are standing in the balconies are like waving red or green as a way to say whether they like it or not. There's social media that you can use if your stakeholders are widely accessible via social media or WhatsApp. You can go ahead and run an entire campaign and see how you can seek opinions and work collaboratively with them through the use of technology. Public announcements, just people in auto rickshaws or loudspeakers just going around the neighborhood, asking people for opinions and so on. Some of these are more tech-oriented. Again, as I said, if your stakeholder group that you have identified is easily accessible on via technology, then you can go ahead and do online videos and have community engagement through Zoom meetings, as we're doing right now. And there's also a way to write about these things and see if these can reach out, like in local newspapers and so on and so forth, where you're seeking ideas and people can send them back to you. You can do closed door surveys. You don't need to speak. You don't need to be face to face with the person. The person can be behind the door, but you can stand on the side of the door and do a closed door survey if you need to survey any people on the ground. You can send out leaflets. You can do online surveys. You can do brochures. There's so many ways that you can explore stakeholder engagement, even in a situation like now. So for each of the categories, the one-way communication, two-way communication, and the collaborative design, we've come up with a bunch of ideas. The publication is available on our website. You can look through it, and I will stop with this here.
If I could add one thing to your really brilliant, informative way of looking at the creative ways to engage communities, is we typically stay anthropocentric in the way we look at stakeholders, that it's always about people. But there are other stakeholders in our communities. The stakeholders, we want to make sure we're giving voice to the voiceless. And those can be other parts of the complex ecosystem of cities. What about the trees? They're stakeholders as well. What about the water? The water is a stakeholder as well. What about the animals that may be a part of the community that have been displaced because of some other intervention that was a mistake? So keeping in mind ways to bring the voiceless stakeholders to the solutions you may come up with. It's just something else to keep in the back of your minds.
The presentation was wonderful. So I like the idea of people putting out red and green to answer if they like it or not. So regarding that, we have a question from YouTube actually. So they're saying, what if the residents or people around that place are scared of such activities happening, and like how do the participants, they're asking for suggestions to deal with it. And they have another question: what if after the first stage the people are not finding this a necessary implement, and people come, they don't want this to happen? So how do we deal with such a situation?
Stephen, you want to take that?
It's very hard to always bring solutions that everyone will love. Some people may not like color choices because of their taste. Some people might not like form choices because they don't like curves. They prefer things that are rectilinear. What we would invite you to do is to take your best ideas and put them out there, and then people can adapt, or you can adapt your ideas. That's one way of managing the future, is you're imagining a solution. But sometimes it's okay to disrupt the way that people imagine a solution to their space. It may be that at first they don't like it, just as when they taste a new food or a new spice. They may not like it, but over time, oh my goodness, that's so delicious. And it could be that the abrupt intervention you come up with is something which is embraced later. Slow and steady wins the race in this case.
You have something to add to this, Vidya?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, Stephen also brought up the idea of the temporary, and we're seeing a surge in tactical urbanism, which is short-term action for long-term change, and as as Stephen said, why don't, you could, but I think fundamentally, if we pick the sort of right challenge, and if we also have the right approach that can meaningfully deal with the challenge that we've identified, I guess, I guess you can work around it. I guess you can. I guess people will come around it, rather, to say it in another way, that they will come around to see that, hey, this is better. And I think I'll go as far as adding another thing that, I don't like it can't get worse, like, like whatever you do, it can't get worse, I mean, the way things are heading and the way things are, and that's what I said, if you really picked like a problem that needs to be solved, it can't get worse.
That's very important, is that that you certainly can't do it any worse than the people who began at the beginning. But it's also meaningful to let the audiences, the stakeholders that you're working with, know that you're trying. We may not succeed in finding the solutions, but it's our obligation to keep pushing. That's the urgent side of this. And while they may not like some of the specific details, they'll probably hold on to the fact that this is a young person in our community who cares and is trying to make a difference. So I wouldn't be too concerned about what people think, but hold close to your heart the fact that you are out there as a participant in your community doing work that matters.
Right.
I mean, and I think that's also why, I think the last thing I want to add is, and that's also why the stakeholder engagement part is so critical to the OAN program, is to ensure just that, I mean, if you're actually going through the 3 stages, where you're first keeping the community informed of whatever is happening, and this is the problem we're dealing with, we're in this together, we're going to work on this, and then you're also hearing them out and seeing what it is that they can bring to the table. I mean, for all you know, the solution might come from a resident. I mean, you might not have the answer. But I think over the course of the interactions, the best solution might just come from one of the residents that you've been interacting with. And the third stage is, of course, the collaborative part, like where you're doing this together, right? Like, so I think more than the sort of looking at it as I need to go out there and I need to build this, or I need to install this, or I need to create this because this is going to solve this problem. The idea is more to look at it as a co-design approach where you're doing this together with the stakeholders, and that's why it's one of the first steps in the methodology as well. Identifying who it is that you're going to work with. But once you've done this, if you've diligently crossed all of these stages, there really should not be any opposition after that.
Right. Yeah, so one of the questions was that to what extent they should go for a stakeholder engagement for the expression of interest submission. Right. So like it is one of the most important things, I feel.
Yeah, and I think I kind of touched upon it earlier as well, that for the expression of interest, it's very critical that they know who the stakeholders are. So please, by all means, complete the mapping and present the mapping of the stakeholders for the expression of interest. I mean, you may find more stakeholders as you start working on it, but then at least, sort of like go through it and see who you think may be potential stakeholders on the project. And like I said, right, the high influence, the high interest parties, like if you're able to reach out to at least one or two of them, I feel like they could enrich the proposal given the current situation, because it's very difficult for you to go out and do a physical assessment. So just for your own sake, I would say, try and reach out to one or two of the sort of, the NGOs or subject matter experts who are working on the issue, and see if you can sound out your idea, and they might be able to help you, refine it or reframe it, or maybe you're seeing the problem in a different way and they might bring in another angle that might enrich your proposal. So I think we're not expecting a very detailed engagement at this stage, but just for your own sake, for your proposal's sake, like engage with some of the stakeholders.
Right. Right. I think one of you said celebrate the temporary. So one of them has asked a question here, saying that the brief says we should plan for years to come. But yeah, I understand this was like a off scenario where something would not be appreciated as much. Like what do you have to say to them? I think two of them have asked this. One of them.
So
even that was you.
So celebrating the temporary doesn't mean that something that's temporary today won't be permanent tomorrow.
Right.
It's almost like a taste test. If you are cooking up something delicious and somebody tastes it, they say, well, it's not quite right yet. I would like to have this as a regular part of my diet, but it's not quite right yet. You would need to add this or take this out. So a temporary solution may end up growing into a long-term solution. So I wouldn't be fearful of that. Yes, we want you to be looking down the road, but some ideas need to adapt over time, especially if it's something which is a tree. You could plant a tree, which is going to take years and years to become the full manifestation of its potential, but it might have to have some branches clipped along the way so that they don't interfere with somebody's view, or maybe get in the way of a traffic sign or something of that sort. So keeping in mind that the temporary is just a gateway to the future, hold on to that and don't be worried about, my recommendation would be, don't be too worried about things that are going to be around forever, because very few things in life will be around forever.
Right.
If I may add to that, like, I would even go as far as saying temporal and not temporary. Like, I think there's value in the temporal, um, um, and I would rather say celebrate the temporal, because there is potential in celebrating that and for it to become something permanent.
Right, right. Makes sense. So another query is that if the solution or proposal that the participants are putting forward, if it caters to only some part of the community and not the whole, so would that be appreciated is one of the questions here.
Vidya, I'm just going to jump into that, and absolutely. You may choose an intervention that affects some of the youngest people in your community. When we look about the spectrum of our lives, what may not be necessary for an adult might be necessary for a child, and vice versa. Something that might be necessary for someone with a disability, someone whose life is in a wheelchair as opposed to being able to walk. What we're doing is finding ways to address a critical, urgent problem that you see. And if somebody in that wheelchair is doing better in their lives, that will make the lives better of those around them as well. They won't have to worry as much about them. They won't have to be as fearful about how they may navigate a street or parts of their building. So remember that it's all connected. Everything, the decisions that we make, the interventions we have are all connected. So while it may look like it's for one small segment of your demographic, in a broader sense, it will improve the quality of life for everyone. It could improve the quality of life for everyone.
Right, right. So we have a question from the survey as well as on Zoom, that there are participants living probably, in remote conditions where they do not have access to technology. So is probably webinar or like Vidya was suggesting, online connection the only solution to them, or could they go with something else?
So I think I was very clear when I said only if your stakeholders have access to technology. Our publication actually addresses all strata, like people who have limited digital access. So the installations that we were talking about are for people, who are low tech, who don't have access to this. So I think uh, that's I mean, we're giving you a platter of solutions to get you started, but I mean, ideally you should be coming up with some ideas for this as well. But in terms of like the site, like I want to know first if they have access to that place itself, because they're going to be able to have to go there and work. So again, given this situation that we are in, I think it's also important to weigh in those options and not just choose a site. Like, if it's a red zone and you don't have access to the site, and the trends are not looking very good, the numbers are rising, and it seems like it's not going to change over the next few months, then I would urge participants to reconsider the site. I mean, that would actually just be common sense.
There are some wonderful examples around the world of engaging stakeholders in ways that are, we might call non-traditional. And if you're not familiar with the work of a brilliant planner and artist, her name is Candy Chang. Her last name is spelled Chang. You may want to Google her, look at some of the ideas that she has come up with to engage citizens, one of which was to wrap a building with a big banner, and the banner said, "Looking for love again." It was an abandoned building that the community didn't want to lose. She wrapped it and said, "Looking for love again." And then people would go around the building and place little notes into a jar of the kinds of ideas that they thought would be useful for that building. So Candy Chang could be an inspiration for some of you in finding even new ways to engage stakeholders that we haven't even thought about yet.
Right. Right. I'd just like to put this to the audience that we've extended the submission date to 18th of July due to the COVID conditions and such. So you guys are still free to think about it and, put up your submissions on 18th of July. Register, sorry. And then, and another thing to the audience is that we're getting a lot of questions. So probably some of them will be answered through a document later, which will be put on nasaindia.co/OAN. All right. So we'll move to, I think we've covered stakeholders pretty well. We'll move on to the other aspect, funding and budgeting. So the question was how to prepare a cost estimate for such a, project that they'll be doing.
Stephen, I'll take this. Is that okay?
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the submission for 18th of July, like all we're expecting is a block estimate. So the grant is for 500 USD, right? So a very simple way would be to work backwards and see what can you do with the 500 USD. Make sure you have like line items, and they could be like just blocks. The line items can be blocks. We're not asking, it's not a BOQ, it's not like, specifications of what you're going to do. So for instance, if you're going to, have a lot of print material that you want to use for stakeholder engagement, or, you want to put out notices somewhere, then printing is one line item. If it's a construction based activity that you're looking at, I'm sure you have a fair idea. You should probably have a fair idea of the nature of construction. Is it is it bamboo? Is it solid? Sort of brick and mortar. And get a rough estimate of the amount of construction that you are looking at. And put that down as construction related as just one line item. That should be sufficient. If you're looking at something tech based, then just do a quick check with someone who does tech based work and see how much it would cost, and put that down as a line item. If you need to buy a lot of materials, then it's a very rough estimate that we're expecting at this stage, and just line items, as I said. We don't want anything more which has any more detail than that. Is that making sense, Idris? I mean,
yes, it is.
Yeah, that's all. Just make sure that, and if you're looking at other sources of funding, and if you then put that down as well, additional sources from and then potential sources for those funding. Like if you feel like you want to reach out to your counselor, or you have some contacts and you're able to do this, or if you're working with your college, university, institution, and if you want to work with the management, and if they're willing to support you on something, and so you put down all of that as additional funding, and and this potential sources that you may be reaching out to at a later stage. Just something to get you started. I want to reiterate that the program is a very mentorship oriented program. You're not on your own once you get selected as an OAN fellow. You're part of the whole network. You will have access to a lot of people who are very specific to your project, expertise very specific to your project, who will help you and guide you, and guide you towards implementation, because all of us want to see this implemented. So I would urge you all not to get overly bogged down with these things. The reason we have these as requirements in the expression of interest is really to get you started in terms of thinking about all of these different stages. We will have to cross all of these stages to get to the implementation. So we wanted to put it out right there, right up front, so that this is what it takes. We can do this, and we'll go all the way with you with this.
Right. Actually, the next question was if they proceed advance to the second stage of implementation, other than the 500 USD that they will be getting for the implementation, what other funding can they approach? I think you've answered that as well. So we'll go ahead. So they are kind of in the gray area regarding mentorship. They're asking, can we have practicing architects as our mentors, and who others can be their mentors?
Vidya, before you jump into that,
I'm not.
excuse me. In many cases, the mentors will be the stakeholders themselves, the citizens themselves. They're the geniuses often in the places where they live. They may not have the formal credentials of architect or engineer or some other person in the allied design professions, but they can be your mentors too. They're the ones whose eyes and ears and sensibilities about the place can guide you into solutions that may be outside of your normal way of thinking. So the mentor is not necessarily needing to be the formal professional, but could be an elderly person whose wisdom becomes the mentoring.
Right. Right. One of the question was, should a mentor be a renowned personality? I think that answers that very well. And then another thing was that they wanted to know the difference between the mentor that, the moderators will be providing the team and the mentors that, probably they'll be having. I think someone is misguided here because they mentioned mentors that they'll be hiring. So I think the team is looking to hire a mentor. So probably you can address that too.
Wow.
Just hire Vidya.
So they just want to know the difference between the mentorship that you guys will be providing as moderators and what they will be getting.
So I think, as I already mentioned, the mentorship is very specific to the project itself, right? Like, so it's a let's just say the program itself is very customized in that way that each OAN fellow is unique, each OAN project is unique, and therefore the way it will be fleshed out and mentored, everything is unique. It's not like yeah, this is what we'll do, this person is going to come and mentor you, this is next step, this is next step. Like different fellows may spend different amounts of time on different stages of the project as well, and that could be entirely based on the project that you have chosen and you've been chosen for, right? Like maybe a project has a lot of hands-on activity on site. Maybe a project has a very extensive stakeholder engagement and the execution is just 1 week. It could sway in any direction. And as I said, I think that each project is unique and customized, and so is our approach to the mentorship. Does that cover it, Stephen? I can't think of any other better way to say this.
Yes, that covers it just perfectly.
So there's another question regarding funding. They're saying if the initial investment, whatever they'll be putting in, is reasonably high, but it results in a chain of beneficiary for the community for a long term, then will it be considered from your end, as in our end, the moderators?
Do I understand the question to be that if they find a solution that the community would like to see expanded, would there be more funding available? Is that
something like that? No, they're saying initially itself, if there's a lot of like it's high investment, and but it's a long term, like a very long term thing that is very beneficial for the society itself. Will it be considered as a special case? They're wanting to know something like that.
That's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure that I have that answer today. I think that we may need to have that conversation with the collaborators so that I'm not misleading anybody with my response.
Right. Okay.
I mean, just, am I getting this right? Are they asking if they will receive more funding from OAN, from the grants program? Oh, okay. I don't think that's fair or on the table right now. I mean, we're picking 3 winners and each of them gets 500 USD. And the idea is also to see, what each team can do with that amount of money. My suggestion is to see if they can scale it down, because scalability is important, and that's something that we will be looking for. So as Stephen mentioned earlier as well, to look at something as a pilot, you don't need to go ahead and be investment heavy right at the beginning, because you want to take it slow, you want to test it, you want to see if it's, I mean, ideally we'd like to prototype it and then see if it's working before we can go full-fledged on with it. So Stephen, we can get back on this, but I think the short answer, and this is like, it like there's no extra funding on the table. Like,
the one exception that we may want to explore is that if the $500 leverages funding from other sources. So for example, the idea stimulates someone in the area, whether it was someone in the private sector or the public sector, said, we're so excited about your idea, we will give you X number of dollars to help make your idea bigger and better. If the funding from the OAN grant leverages additional funding, yes, that would be terrific and welcomed, because the idea is to create momentum for change. And we're more than happy to be stimulating momentum as opposed to it having to stay within the $500. That may or may not address the question, but that came to mind in listening.
No, it was good that you had put it out there. Right. So we have a few more questions.
So Stephen, if I may say this, just to, like, I mean, it is a sort of an important question. Like, so like the OAN program will help the participants seek more funding from other sources, but like we don't have any extra money to put on the table. But if they're seeking other funding sources and it requires an endorsement from our side, then we would be happy to give that. Does that work,
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, so we would, so we will sort of, write you a letter saying you're an OAN fellow and that you're part of this grants program. And, if it makes it easier for you to seek funding from another entity, then we will support you in that way, for sure.
Yes, if you're thinking big, and this is a small way to think big, we're more than happy to put whatever resources behind that we can.
Right. So another interesting question is that, are non-building solutions accepted for this program? Because non-building solutions can also be considered architecture, and they are kind of concerned about the grant that they'll be getting also. Will they be getting a grant for such a, because if it is a tech-based solution, then, they will be putting in some money, I'm assuming, because from their question, that's what I'm understanding. So will it be considered, is their question.
Vidya, do you want to answer that?
There's just one answer for that. It's yes.
Terrific.
Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely.
I mean, build less, please.
Absolutely. It could be a policy that someone recommends and that the local authorities would want to adopt. That would be a fantastic solution. And the unbuilt solutions can be some of the richest ones. In fact, it may be that the solution is removing something, not adding something.
Right. There's one question. Right. One of the questions that from the presentation that Vidya showed. So if they put up an installation for, getting the response of the stakeholders, they're asking if they can put that budget also in, the grant that you guys will be providing, because it is for the project itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I said, if you're looking at printing material and, that's definitely goes in as a line item, like by all means. Yeah. And that's all part of the project, right? Like, and part of delivering the project. So yes, for sure.
Right. Okay. I think we've covered almost everything. We are just left with last, portion of questions that we have. This is regarding permissions. So they're curious to know if, UDC and NASA will, help them get permissions due to whatever reasons, pandemic or any other, blockheads that they'll get into. So will UDC or NASA pitch in? to helping them getting permissions?
Does that mean I have to go to somebody's office and wait?
I don't know what they're asking. Okay, from NASA's side, I'll say that we're like, we'll be happy to provide any document saying that this is an official certified competition. I mean, sorry, a grants program that they'll be doing and those things. But to physically be present there, or to talk to someone, I think those things won't be possible. I think same holds good for UDC too, that any sort of documentation that we can provide, we will be providing.
And the
Right.
same is true on our end. We'll be delighted to provide whatever letters, phone calls that may be necessary. But as much as I would love to come to India, I can't do that right now.
Right. Right. So the following questions are regarding that itself. Last few questions. They're saying that, as is the case sometimes in our country, that things move slowly for whatever reason. So, how do you put this up as first priority, and how would that affect the program itself? Because if they're not able to implement in the stipulated time, then it might affect their outcomes. So that's what they're wanting to know. Like how does
So I think it has been communicated and updated in the brief as well that we are not following the originally proposed timeline for the project. And I'm going to repeat myself that each project is going to be customized, and the goal is to get it, implemented. And if you can go ahead and do it in 3 months, fine. Or if you need more time, that's fine. But like our sort of engagement with the OAN fellow, the chosen OAN fellow, will continue till it is completed. Of course, that also means on the other side that we require the same commitment that the students don't lose steam and want to drop out midway, but are willing to also carry this through with the same level of commitment that we have for the program.
Right. Right.
The jury, I believe, will be very sensitive to the time frame for this, and it may be useful to keep in mind a great Greek phrase, which is, "Wise people plant trees under whose shade they will never sit."
Right. That's a very nice thing. So another thing, probably because they're students, they're asking this, is that how to show the other person that they're serious about this, and what kind of backing would they require. They want suggestions for this because they're thinking that the authorities might not take them seriously. So if you have any suggestions to give to them.
So here's the thing, and I go back to the scale of it, right? Like I think the mood at the moment is to try out a lot of things, and authorities are definitely across many cities I've been seeing are open to trying out different ideas. I think the key is the scale of it. If you're gonna say I want to intervene in like some 12 different locations in the city, and I want to like stop traffic here, and I want to do this, then it starts getting a little complicated for them as well, right? But if you're going to say that I'm taking this sort of one street or this neighborhood park or this little space here, or I'm creating a platform for you to do something that you're doing in a better way, something that doesn't take too much of effort, time, and resources from their side is very important to keep in mind, right? Like, so when you're planning something, don't keep sort of don't put a lot of onus on them doing like 10 number of things for the project to actually happen, right? Then it's the possibility of it happening is going to be that much lesser, like the larger number of things that you have for someone else to do, right? So keep that minimum, and I think that should work. Like if you're like all you want is like we're going to do this, and it's not going to hamper anything, I don't think you're going to find any opposition from any of the public authorities. You have your own funds to do this, which is actually a great impetus for them to say, okay, like the only thing is if you adding to their responsibilities and you're going to create another kind of a problem. Like I want you all to keep in mind something else, right? Like most often, you see a problem and you find a solution that basically shifts the problem to another place, and that's when people start getting like edgy, right? Like, and that's not a good solution to start with. Like if you're only like transferring the problem from one location to another location, then you haven't really solved anything, right? So I guess just keep these things in mind. Like keep the onus more on yourself, and keep the onus on a small group of like a small group of people that you can have a direct two-way communication with whom you can with whom you can work with, and see if you can get something done in that manner. And of course, always a well thought through solution. Nobody can say no to it.
Okay, fine. We have just last two questions. I think small questions itself. So one of the participant wants to know if even if they don't move ahead to the second round, will they, like, all of their ideas be put on any platform so that they can go through it? That will be helping them. I think we were discussing this the other day, if their work will be put up anywhere, right? So would any of you would like to answer that?
Steven,
we
go for
had
it.
talked about this the other day. We are hoping to create something like a Pinterest site where the various ideas can be celebrated. It's that we can only give out 3 of these grants, but there may be ideas that are worth 10 of these grants. We want these ideas out there to inspire others and maybe inspire the communities and the stakeholders in the places where your ideas are taking root, to maybe fund them on their own, or because we might find so many important ideas that we might be able to find additional funding going forward. I think one last idea that I would put out to you is we're inviting all of you to be radical. The radical in biology is that first root that comes out of a seed. And that little root that comes out of the seed works its way down into the earth and works its way around all the obstacles, the rocks. It works its way around to find the nutrients it needs in order that it can self-actualize and become its greatest potential. Your ideas could lead to the great potential in a place that you care about. And we will do everything possible to cultivate those ideas, and celebrating them on a Pinterest type site is something we would like to do, as long as we have your permission to do it.
Right. I think NASA will be more than happy to put up the entries on the website. And
I want to reiterate the global network that OAN is, and therefore the as what Stephen was saying, maybe the idea is taken up somewhere else, and someone actually goes ahead. With all due credits, of course, because it's part of the OAN network. You're interacting with other OAN fellows, and there's an exchange of ideas, and I mean, the possibilities are endless. Maybe you end up working on it somewhere else, with another team, and maybe not in the original place that you proposed the idea.
Right. So we've actually extended the time because of active participation already. And then, we'll take up this last question that they have regarding the jury. So they want to know if the jury will be, they want to know if the jury will be an open jury, as in, will the jury be announced?
What does that mean?
Who
is going to be on the jury?
Will they be announced? They want to know who will be the judges.
Yes, we will put them out on the OAN, the NASA OAN site. We're in the process of finalizing the jury, and their names will obviously be put up on the site.
Transparency is one of the guiding principles of all of our work. So we assure you that there will be no secrets.
Right. I think we've covered up. I mean, there are a few questions because of the time, we will answer them through the document that I was talking about. Any last statements from the both of you? Stephen, probably you can go first.
I want to reiterate the privilege that we have in working with NASA and working with the Urban Design Collective to kick off the Global Observation and Action Network from India. The inspiration that we have found working with our colleagues in India is something we want to share around the world. So your ideas as new young participants in helping us heal and repair the places that we care about is vital. Thank you for taking the time tonight on a Saturday night to participate in this conversation, and we look forward so much to the ideas that you will present to us.
All right. Vidya, any last statements?
I just want to say that we're really, really looking forward to seeing all your creative responses. Creative responses, I'm going to say that again, because that's what it is. That's what the program is about. And you know, it's again, we've spoken so much about you know, engagement and working together, and I hope it comes across to everyone listening that it is the very essence of the program itself. It's not just, you know, that we're looking for you to go out there and collaborate and, you know, engage with the people out there, but also that, you know, we will continue to engage with you, and that, you know, this is, you know, we've got to, you know, sort of, you know, bring all hands on deck, and our commitment to this is utmost. And I want to wish everybody the very best. The submission date has been extended to the 18th of July. There will not be any more further. I know this has been the second extension. There will not be any further extensions. I just want to put that out as well in case somebody is expecting another extension. 18th July, 11:59 p.m. Is when we close. We'd like to see as many of you put out your ideas. We're really looking forward to seeing what you have, what you can come up with. I understand this is an extremely difficult moment for all of us. I know this because we too are struggling, you know, to deliver our projects. But I say that you know, in a way that you will know that. In a way that, you know, maybe reassuring to you that, you know, we know exactly how it feels, so we will, you know, help you also navigate through this very difficult, uncertain situation. Again, please put out any other further questions that we've not managed to address today. The FAQ, I think, has been open for a while. We've received a few questions which we have answered, and going forward before the submissions, is there anything else, please do put your questions out. I hope this has been a useful session for all of you, and I hope that it, you know, has alleviated some of the fears and anxieties and doubts that you may have. It's you know, the problems that you have are global. I want you to keep that in mind, and that we're also, you know, treading this with that same knowledge. The jury too, we're extremely conscious of identifying a jury that is going to be equally sensitive to the challenges that we have at the moment. You know, I would urge you all to sort of, you know, rest all your fears and just give it your very best in terms of arriving at a creative response to this. Because, you know, I guess at the end of the day, you know, I mean, the idea is what matters. We'll figure a way out after that.
So from the entire team at NASA, we feel thankful to UDC and the center, and really privileged, you know, to inaugurate such a program at the center and here at NASA itself. I'd like to thank all the participants and everyone who, you know, answered our survey. That's what got us going for this session. All right, then. I think that's it. Bye. Good night from my side.